Now, real people, real opinions. Nighttime talk with Niall Boylan.
Ireland's classic hits radio.
Welcome back on this haunting night. Now, I'm looking at a website here, folklore.ie. It is a living online archive centred on the practice and the artists of folklorist Michael Fortune and an insight into his practice. Now, he's been working in this field since the late 1990s. And this website is a really good introduction to his folklore, oral history and place-based recording work. And this is all around, a lot of it centres around Halloween, a lot of other stuff too, but a lot of it centres around Halloween. So we need to get to the bottom of this idea that somehow we believe we kind of own Halloween in this country, don't we? You know, the kind of Feast of All Souls or whatever we call it. You know, all the kind of tricks that we do on Halloween, all the little kind of things that we have done over the years, they're all ours. And that somehow, and somebody actually said it to me there going back a few weeks ago. They said, "No, we gave the world St. Patrick's Day and Halloween." And I went, "Well, I'm at Halloween now. Did we really?" Let me just go to Michael. Michael Fortune joins me on the line. Michael, hi, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. Yeah, I'm good.
Michael, firstly, let's go back to this caller who said to me 3 weeks ago, we gave the world St. Patrick's Day and Halloween. We didn't give the world Halloween, did we?
Well, come here to me. It's a funny one. We need to unravel it a little bit. We certainly influenced the American version of Halloween, without doubt. That's absolutely without doubt in the 1800s. And that has then went on then to basically become what the world is kind of lapping up now as Halloween. But if we were to kind of strip back, so in the contemporary sense, yeah, to put why us going to America influenced it, and then it just grew legs in America. But then if we were to strip back what our own Halloween traditions are here, if we look at what the Scots do, or over in the Welsh, or over in the Isle of Man, or over in Germany and parts of Holland as well, we start to see the links to the links across Europe. But
where did it come from? What's the origins of Halloween night? Now, you mentioned, by the way, that Halloween, or the Halloween experience, as you call it, is all about the food harvest, the mummying of the disguise. In other words, we wear masks and stuff like that, and the deadlight and tricks and divilment. So, in other words, those little kind of tricks we get up to on Halloween, trying to fool people and upset people and frighten people and all that kind of stuff. So, where do those traditions originate from, or how do they originate?
There are different strands that would have kind of originated at different times. Like if we look at one of Remember the Dead, say, at that particular one, Halloween night, and even leading into All Saints Day, which is tomorrow, and All Souls Day is the day after, the idea, one of the really strongest things, and that's even going back to the early Christianity, this idea of remembering the dead and the living or the dead walking and being among us. And even to this day, like, to me, I'm no mass goer, but still I'd light a candle on All Souls Night and put it out for my mother and father who passed away, and I saw them doing it when we were children, and I saw my grandmother doing it. So this idea that we kind of believe that our dead came back. I know a man from Laois who said that his father used to always leave the table set with like a couple of bottles of stout and packs of cards and bags, and in
case the spirits come back looking for a drink.
Yeah, absolutely, and people still do it and people do it privately. I know traveller women in Dublin who will set the table on All Souls Night. Now, some people believe that happened on Halloween night as well. So there's always been a little bit of flux. When you have layers upon layers built upon other layers, you're going to get kind of crossover. So give or take those kind of 2-3 days, that kind of idea that the dead came back, that was definitely early Christian, and who knows, that could have been going way before that.
And it's been given numerous nights names as well: All Hallows Eve, All Holland, you mentioned Visgarding Night, and also then you mentioned parts of Wexford it's known as Black Men Night, or Collicking Night, or in other parts of the country they call it Puka Night, and we talked to somebody about the Puka recently, by the way, on the show. Pokey Night, Juggy Night, Snap Apple Night. I can see where the Snap Apple comes from. My father used to play a game of Snap Apple with the apple on the string, and over in Newfoundland they call it Colcallan Night. And by the way, that's another tradition we have on Halloween, which is eating Colcallan, which is probably the only time of the year that we actually eat it.
Yeah, and come here to me, and it'll start around now. As soon as I mention the Wexford recipe, I'll guarantee it'll be Dublin people phoning in, because they'll be getting it tonight. And I'm nearly 50 years of age now, and I'd say since I was about 40, since I was about 5 years old, my mother always had called cannon on the go at home, Halloween night, and the house would be the same, and I could smell it still.
And who decided to put money into it? This whole idea of putting a money in. Now, in the barn bracket used to be the ring, but my mother used to wrap 250 pences in a piece of tin foil and put it into your potatoes. There seems to be like a million traditions around Halloween. All these traditions all coming together in one day. Whose idea was that to give away money?
I don't know, but there were loads of things around Halloween around the idea of your future. So you're going in from autumn into winter. So you had to have all your everything in order, like your vegetables stored up and everything else. So there was a bit of chance, and there was a bit of play then with regard to basically what your future is going to be. So there's loads of games around that. Like the idea of putting money in, which your mother did and my mother did, into money, which is actually really strong in Dublin. That's the great thing as well. I'm delighted you said that, because sometimes people will say to you, "Oh, there's no traditions like that in Dublin. You have to go out west." And I said, "That's rubbish. I guarantee it'll be people."
Yeah, my mother did it. Yeah. Yeah,
housing estates in Dublin, and it'd be much stronger than parts on the west coast of Ireland. So that's a really thing. But some people put a ring into it, and like the barn bracks years ago, especially when people made them, you put in different objects. Now it's the ring, but years ago it was money. It was a holy.
Do they still put the ring in the barn brack? Because health and safety nowadays, they'd be afraid some kid might swallow it, so they probably don't do it anymore. It probably comes in a separate bag or something like that as well. I mean, the other tradition, of course, that we all know as kids, and it's changed drastically over the years. In our day, it was just you had a black bag and you cut a few slots in it for your arms to go through, and you put a hat on your head and went as a witch or whatever it was, right? Or as my mum used to do, she used to get one of my dad's old suits, cut a few slices out of it with a blade, and put a bit of dirt on my face and send me out as a homeless person or something like that. It was cheap and basic. Nowadays, people spend hundreds on costumes and masks, and the masks in our days were those kind of hard plastic masks that you got in the shop with a elastic string on the back of it, and they were all very basic. But nowadays, it has come on an awful lot. Where did the idea come from of disguising yourselves by whatever means you possibly could?
Again, one of those traditions. Again, the Europeans would have had it as well to some degree. The idea with Halloween was the start of the winter, going into winter, Niall, right?
Yeah.
So this idea of dressing up in disguise, and you did it at say Halloween here. We also did it on come St. Stephen's Day with the Wren Boys. We did Christmas Fools. We did this on St. Bridget's Day, and we ended it at Easter. So that was that kind of span of maybe 4 months, give or take, whenever Easter would have ended. Now, the mainland Europeans did the same, the Germans did the same, the Dutch did the same, then Scots did the same, but we did it. And it's funny, there was a map done actually, it was an interesting map done back in the 1940s, Kevin Danaher did it, of where the Guy's tradition was really strong. And it was strong, honest to God, it was Leinster, South Ulster, and that's where it was. And it wasn't in the other parts of the country. We obviously it became popular in the 60s and 70s, and every part of the country did it, but it wasn't. But this idea of dressing up and calling to your neighbours and getting something, there was play, there was action. I see my mother used to do it, getting dressed up. We did it. I still do it. There's great power. Come here to me. There's great power of me going into Boylan's kitchen there now, and them not knowing who I am, and changing me sex and putting on putting some
a few lumps and bumps in you, as you mentioned. Yeah.
So there's great power in that, and there's a bit of play, and especially in country areas. I always said the Halloween experience in the country areas is different than the cities, because I suppose the country ones will kind of still half expect you to be dressed up at the call, and they know there's a little bit of play going on, a little bit of devilment, and you know that you're the children from down the road. You know that kind of way. You change your voice for the one night. But
and it changed, by the way. It used to be help the Halloween party. That's what we used to say. Nowadays, it's all trick or treat, which is quite American. We used to go up to the door and it would help the Halloween party, and you'd get a wine apple, or you'd get a banana or an apple, nuts, a few monkey nuts. In those days, people didn't have the money for Brazil nuts and walnuts, but just monkey nuts. Nowadays, they're getting bars of chocolate. They don't get nuts anymore for obvious reasons, because some kids are allergic to them or whatever. But they don't even get fruit anymore. It's all just chocolate.
Yeah, come here. It's funny you mentioned a great word there, which we didn't have down here in Wexford. Wine apples. I heard the Dublin woman use that there last year for me. They were
pomegranates. Yeah, pomegranates, isn't it?
Pomegranates. Yeah, wine apples. Yeah.
My mother my mother loved them. They were called, and actually they were fairly tasty if you could actually get a bit of fruit out of it, because you had to pull these little pip things out of it in the centre. But yeah, wine apples they were called. That's what my mother used to call them.
Yeah. Well, come here, that's tied back in. The idea of getting fruit and nuts, whatever, ties back into the harvesting again, the idea of having apples. One of the things that the people will say, and this is all over the country, they always say that the fairies were out that night on what they call it puka night, and they said they'd be after having a wee or spitting on the apples. and so basically, there were little signals and triggers in life, basically take all your apples off the tree, because after that, then the fairies are after doing their business on them. So that made sense. And I suppose, come here to me, where I lived in the coast of Wexford, we got money, and I suppose I think that was tied in with the idea that there was predominantly a lot of poorer lads would have been going around getting a few pence. And I know my own grandmother, her accounts were from around the early 1920s, and they were something similar to what you described. They would get money, and then they would go have a Halloween party maybe 3 days later in someone else's house. They'd be late teens.
Or the local pub in Ballygarrett.
The local pub in Ballygarrett, which I often went to dressed up at Halloween. And it's funny, we'd spot the Dubliners or the baiters, as we affectionately
the blow-ins. Yeah. Because
the Dublin people dressed up in fancy dress, and while the country ones went on with a pillowcase on their head, and then there was cushion up their back, and the idea was that no one would fucking know you for the whole night. You'd sit there, you'd sit there. Even though I remember still had to go with balaclavas on them and dressed up and all night, the most uncomfortable things all night, drinking pints through a sweaty stocking over your face.
Yeah, and the whole idea, of course, was that other people wouldn't recognise you and you could get up to devilment without knowing who you were. But mind you, it would be revealed probably at the end of the night. But I suppose the other part of Halloween too that was traditional, again, I don't know, in Ballygarden or in Wexford was it traditional, but the games. My father loved the games. Now, my father was a great man for Halloween. He had a projector as well, by the way, and he'd set up a screen and he'd invite the kids of the neighbourhood in to watch a movie, Frankenstein, the original Hammer House horror movies, and he had it on Super 8 film. And and we'd watch that and be terrified, and then he'd start playing games. So it would be the big basin with the apples in it, hanging the apple from the door with the string. There was a couple of other games, I can't remember them all now. But where do those are they traditional games, or do they just kind of derive somewhere along the line?
Yeah, they would be traditional, and actually, no one knew we were talking earlier on about getting the nuts. I know that, for example, in Malta, when they go out on their version of Halloween, they go looking for nuts as well, and the parts of Germany was the same. And I know the games that we would have played, some of the games, there was one game played in Dublin, and it was played here in Wexford as well, where you'd put a blindfold on a child, you'd spin him around a couple of times, and you'd put maybe 3 or 5 plates in front of them, and basically there was on each plate was different symbols, like water for immigration, a stick for heart, you play for death, the themes of them were heavy, and you spin the child around, and I always assumed they were Irish games, but when you go back through the archives, you'll find I found sketches of that game in England back in the 1820s. So it's funny, just things move on, and they just move on, and they come over here, and then we take them on and we adopt them and make them our own, and they die out over in England in some cases. That's what I kind of find. But I found traditions kind of moved westward when it came to mainland Europe. It kind of moved with people. But yeah, all those games were came to me again. They were about finding out your future, who you were going to marry. But then there was loads of play as well. I suppose and that came to me. That's one of the things that I actually like about it. We've got 3 children here, and they have got used to all. They expect that Halloween's they're going to be playing games. They expect they're going to push my face into a pile of flour. They expect, that we're going to be putting our head under a bottle of, or into a basin of water covered laced with spit. You know what I mean?
Yeah, laced with spit. I mean, the other thing too is the bonfires. So the bonfire is more of a British tradition, isn't it? Originally, probably from Guy Fawkes. But was the bonfire in Halloween in Ireland before Guy Fawkes night?
Oh yeah, I'll come here to me. From what I can see, it would have been right for sure. Now I know that again, going back to my own grandmother, they used to call it a bonfire. They used to always say that as children were sent out to collect bones for this bonfire, or bonfire as they call it.
Okay.
So I know that bonfires were really big on the 1st of May and on Halloween night, and you'll still see them on the 1st of May. You would have got bonfires probably up until the 80s and 90s in Arklow, and all around the country areas in North Wexford till the 50s and 60s on the 1st of May, and then at Halloween a little bit as well. But it was really strong in Dublin. I know it's very strong in Dublin. I suppose the fire brigade would have a different outlook on it.
Yeah, they have a different way of dealing with it nowadays. The council go around wrapping all the wood and taking it off the poor kids. In our day it was kind of the local field, whoever the local gurriers were, they would collect all the bonfire wood and we just sit there and enjoy it. But there was always a few parents around. Unfortunately, in some cases, those bonfires have got a bit out of control. But I do think, look, it's all part of the fun of Halloween. And the other aspect of Halloween is the ghosts. We've quite a number of traditional ghosts in this country, and I don't know where they originate from. I mean, the likes of the Banshee and the White Lady, and what was the one there up in the Dublin Mountains about the man playing poker with the devil or something? What was that? Or the Hellfire Club? Yeah. All of those kind of ones. I mean, I'm assuming they all have origins of why we talk about them on Halloween night and those particular types. Like, where did the Banshee come from?
Well, come here, the Banshee in Ireland, whatever. Someone says like a fairy woman, and people would describe her as 4 foot high. Some describe her as 5
one
foot
eye,
high.
One eye, and a comb in her hand. I used to hear
a comb in her hand, and she come here to me like the Banshee and the fairies, like everywhere. Like you always say, like everywhere. just, come here. There was no radio, there was no television. So people entertain themselves.
Yeah.
So people entertain themselves and they're frightened of living out of themselves as well. That was part of the deal. Lads were trying to better each other with stories. They said that all the banshees and the fairies disappeared when the electric light came. That's the kind of classic story you'll hear all over the country. But those stories were entertainment. Half the time they were entertainment. They would warn you about certain things. Sometimes they had purposes. But the classic one you probably heard in Dublin as well growing up, you'd never pick up a banshee's comb off the road.
No.
If you did, you're from rapping on the window that night and you'd have to redden the tongs in the fire and put the...
That's right, yeah. You weren't allowed to pick up the banshee. If you saw a comb on the ground, it was immediately assumed it was belonged to the banshee and you'd never pick it up.
Yeah, that's the classic story. And there's so many, we've got so many fairy stories about places, things you wouldn't do.
Do you remember the White Lady? Do you remember I used to hear about the White Lady. Now, I don't know very much about the White Lady, but the White Lady, it seemed that there was a ghost creature or figure that used... When we used to go out with the Scouts and the Cubs and they'd have these kind of retreats or whatever it was, you'd be brought up to... Where was it? That place in Dublin up near the mountains. I can't remember what the name of it was. Anyway, you'd be brought up there and you'd be told that out in the woods in the forest was the White Lady and the Banshee. And I always remember the White Lady and go, what's the story about the White Lady? Some woman in a white dress or something? I don't know who she is.
But come here to me. I come across a green lady in Limerick who would drag you under. But we've got children. My mother told us stories as children, and I'm not a storyteller, but I was just sit down at night putting the children to bed and telling them stories and making up stuff.
Yeah.
And I guarantee you, there was an old field near us. And when you start to plant a story, they're amazing, Niall, when you think about it. Because you're imagining these places, and you just connect with the landscape completely different, you know.
Yeah.
So they are, like, especially, they mean so much to children, you know, and come here to me making up lies and telling stories to children, you know. It's actually good cracking. Do you know what
it is? But the stories get put together. You see, what happens is, like the story about the Hellfire Club about some guy playing poker with the devil. And he sold his soul because he'd no more money, and then he looked under the table and noticed that the guy he was playing poker with had hooves as his feet. Now that story has been told in numerous different contexts about numerous different people, but yet it's stuck to the Hellfire Club for some reason, and I have no idea where the story originated from. But I suppose it's selling your soul to the devil, isn't it? And that's the moral of the story.
Yeah, there was one more. That story is repeated in Loftus Hall in Wexford.
That's right, yeah. In Loftus, I remember going down to Loftus Hall, actually. We went down with the show once to do a Halloween show.
Castletown House in Kildare. And actually, come here, it crops up in Mayo, but Catholic Church put it out in Mayo. So you'd under these stories. There was a case years ago where there was dance halls, and the dance halls weren't the parish dance halls, so they couldn't make any money on them, right? So this dance hall opened up, I think it was in Turin in County Mayo, and this girl asked this fella up for a dance, or this fella asked the girl for a dance, and she didn't during the slow self when they're getting a bit too close for comfort, didn't she look down and she noticed that he got devil's hooves on his
feet, yeah.
And he shut up through the ceiling anywhere, shut up out the door or something like that, and apparently the dance hall was closed down afterwards. So someone invented that story and it served its purpose, and the dance hall was closed down. So, you know, stories have been invented since time began to serve a purpose, whether it's, you know, from whatever you're into, you know. But one of the great things about folklore and stories is only for a lot of our folklore and belief in the fairies, but again, take that in inverted commas, we'd be at the loss archaeologically to like our Raz and our fairy forts, because the stories protected them. People were afraid their lives to bulldoze them or to touch them. Not always, but by and large, they had respect for them because they had the story associated with them, you know.
Yeah, we did speak to a lad. We spoke to a lad on the radio going back about 3 or 4 months ago. And he was an expert on all the fairies and the fairy forts, and he was telling us all about them. He's online and he's doing really well, and he has a website, and tourists come to see the fairy forts, and he brings them on a little tour around his land to see the fairy forts and the portals, as he calls them, into fairyland. Which I know about, but the Healy Rays were talking about the fairy forts, weren't they, recently as well, because of the potholes in the road? They said it was a fairy fort or something like that. I can't remember. Anyway, it's mad to hear people talking about fairy forts. But look, I mean, Halloween has changed, as I said. It's kind of a little bit unrecognisable now, isn't it? Because it's very Americanised. We have all these kind of wonderful decorations, you know, that you buy in Lidl and Aldi and everywhere else, and hang them up, etc. It's become a bit like Christmas now, hasn't it?
It has. It really has. And I can see it myself from my own children, and I see it myself from my own sisters and all them. And here's the thing, though. You know, I can handle change. You know, I'm reluctant to handle change, but I can handle change sometimes. You know, here's one thing that happened. Right, we looked at our Ran boys and all on St. Stephen's Day. It was done in Kildare, Laois, Wexford. Right. it's, you'd barely find it done anymore, right? And the thing that I've been saying for years, in some ways you'd be giving out about people happening to go to America, some people would be giving out, but in some ways, only for surviving in America, I don't think it probably would have survived with us, because we're the queerest people. We'll throw out stuff or drop things for whatever reason, because that was not cool or we're not sophisticated enough. And in some ways, we're buying it back in now. We kind of know we're actually after owning it now. In some ways, we're actually the last decade we're after re-owning it. So, and that kind of way. Like your friend said 3 weeks ago to you, like actually we invented St. Patrick's Day. Are we?
Yeah.
That's ours. So to me, that's a good thing. In some ways, only for going to America and surviving in America, it's made us kind of reinvigorated the tradition back with us, and we can kind of go, actually, this is what we did. So I hope we can learn from what's going on around us, and the Chinese plastic masks and all that kind of crack. But they're all part of our practices. To spend the time playing the games with the chaps at home, doing some of the stuff. As long as we don't doesn't lose the run of it. I think we're okay. I think we're in a good position with it. I'll be honest with you. And
there was a mother rang me the other night. There, she was on the air with us the other night, and she told us that the kids got a note home from school saying that they're not allowed to wear masks of anything scary like a monster or a witch or the devil or anything into school anymore, because it might upset some of the other kids. And I go, for God's sake, what have we become? What are we becoming that we can't even scare the odd kid every now and again?
Especially if they're our own, we're allowed to anyway, for sure. Right?
Yeah, clown masks. Remember the little plastic masks with the little elastic string on them? That was the kind of popular. Nowadays they're all silicone and all this kind of stuff. But in those days, it was like a clown or a monster.
Sorry, you brought back something there to me. Do you have a recollection as a child, Niall, of getting your tongue stuck in one of those plastic masks?
Oh, yes. Do you remember you used to stick your tongue out too on purpose, and then your tongue would get caught in it? I do remember that. But apart from anything else, the sweat would be teeming off you under the mask, because it was so warm, because it was just hard plastic. Nowadays it's all kind of breathable silicone and all that kind of stuff. But I do remember sticking my tongue out. Or I remember putting my hands up and sticking your fingers out through the eyes of it. Do you remember doing that as well? Stick your fingers out through the eyes. Oh, I tell you brought back some great memories there, Michael.
Thanks. Yeah.
And people want lots more of those, by the way. Your website, by the way, folklore.ie. By the way, I noticed on your website, your books are sold out. They did really well.
Yeah, the folklore Wexford book sold out. There's another one there on the Maybush in County Wexford, which looks at the whole Maybush tradition that came out there last May. They're there. Actually, when you're there, when I have you, I do a lovely thing that I call the Irish Dresser and Folklore Calendar. So I bring it out. It's the 5th year doing it. I started during COVID, so I come here to me. One of the things that I do, I spend a lot of time in people's houses and yards and live and recording and taking photographs, and I'm fucking starting to those lovely dressers all over the country, even in Dublin. Mm-hmm. And I collected it, documenting those. But I produced this calendar called Dresser and Folklore Calendar. So it's a photograph of dressers, but then it's got about 100 Irish folk dates in them. And all stuff that you can actually step over, that's not making up kind of new age Celtic-y stuff.
Yeah.
There's interviews of people, the way that I can say, that's real, that's a man podcast. So they're available online.
And then they can buy them on the website as well, folklore.ie.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's a great website. I mean, looking at it there a few minutes ago, it's a wonderful website. Folklore.ie if people want to go to it. Michael's books are available there, and his calendar is available there, and any other information that we've talked about tonight is all available there. You've also got numerous links to YouTube videos as well and everything else. But I find the whole thing intriguing because Halloween was such a great time. I loved it as a child. Loved it. I loved the whole dressing up and the idea of the bit of divilment. It was always good fun, wasn't it?
Yeah, come here, divilment was huge, and even the word divilment, my mother, God rest her, she's always things like, there were no rules in Halloween like me. She said no rules, and she was a very kind of straight-laced woman enough, so there were no rules. One of the things that went on all over the country was this thing called gate lifting. Every farmer in the country hated Halloween night because young lads would rob their gates. And they'd rob their gates and then they'd leave them in the ditch, or maybe swap with a neighbour's gate, or leave them then up outside the chapel in the village here. There was always kind of games, and that's where they said the American trick or treating. When you look at the stuff around New England back in the 1800s, you can see the Irish influence there in what they were doing. It became something else then, obviously, and you can see it as well, even in Newfoundland as well. You can see the Irish influence in Halloween, and that's still a bit closer to us there.
Or knick-knacking. Do you remember knick-knacking? We used to do a bit of knick-knacking on Halloween night as well. For people, for the people who didn't want to play a role in the whole Halloween, the way some people would leave their lights off in their hall, so you wouldn't call there, you're not going to get nothing off them. But we'd knick-knack on their house anyway. We'd go up and knock on the door just to annoy them.
Well, we live in the middle of the country, so that wasn't a thing for us now, to be fair. So ours was
All right,
fairly,
no,
fairly
I say now, Michael, our knick-knacking got really inventive. I remember robbing a ball of thread off my mother and tying the thread to the knocker and then running down the garden, unrolling it and hiding behind a wall, myself and my mate Ray. And we'd be pulling the string to knock on the door of the person to be coming out. No one there. Oh, we had hours of fun. But of course, I remember also going into Henry Street with my dad just before Halloween. My mum or dad would bring me in, and we'd buy packets of sparklers. Because sparklers have been around since time began. And well, at least they're certainly there 60 years since I was a child. And then the odd, marketeer would be walking up to you going, "Do you want to buy some bangers, love?" So the fireworks kind of became popular as well, which I'm assuming is all part of the bonfire tradition.
Absolutely. Come here to me. You even still see it. I think it's probably still done in Dublin. It's done in Arklow and Wexford Town. I say on Christmas, on New Year's Eve night, people will go outside, anything at all to make it to bang. Basically get saucepan lids and saucepans or bang them together just to ring in the new year. So this idea of making noise and letting off fireworks, or I know again in Paris in Newfoundland to be letting off shots and stuff like that. So it is. Come here to me. It is part of that tradition, really. In the sense of making noise on that night. Yeah. But I don't know when the first sparklers or bangers and all came in, but definitely fires were there for sure. I'm thinking of other stuff there when you were talking as well. God, it was low. Just you're sparking memories of me, and I'll come off this conversation going, I should have told you that, but that's what always happens. Yeah. In these kind of chats.
It was always my memory was, of course, that Halloween to me as a child seemed like the first kind of cold night. Do you understand what I'm saying? So obviously the point you're making is the start of the winter season, right? And the start of the winter solstice. But it was like, it kind of always felt like that first cold night. You'd be going out blowing a bit of haft, we used to call it. When you go, and there'd be condensation coming out of your mouth. We used to call that haft. There'd be haft. So you'd go out and you'd be hafting through your mask, and then your mask would be sweating on the inside because you'd be warm underneath the mask. But it was the first cold night. It just seemed like that as a child. It was a cold, damp night, and it just always felt different on Halloween night.
Absolutely, and you nailed it, and that's exactly what it is. And that's the sensory experience. The idea of a child, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, going out that night by yourself. There's adventure. You're going out in the dark and you're covered up, and no one knows who you are. You don't know. There's a little bit of there's something uneasy about the thing, whether you're going to guess, or maybe someone's going to fucking attack you and rob your sweets or rob your
apples.
Yeah, exactly. So there's loads of that, and I definitely the idea of there's a great experience for children, like even going out in the dark. Exactly, you going out in the dark night, the mystery of it,
Yeah.
And we're after coming from the months and months of the summer, so it makes sense as well. Some of these things I kind of like. I think we'd be we'd be at a loss. If we didn't have these dates, like we'd be, the winter would be quite long,
Oh, would,
even if we didn't have, these were picked for reasons, we're only borrowing from what our ancestors did before us, and they made sense. Those calendar days made sense for us, They really did make sense. Now there becomes something else now, whatever, there is that commercial side of it, but listen, we have to kind of roll with that too to some degree. That's the world we live in.
It's all part of the fun, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, we have to kind of roll with it and make it the best we can. Or if we see something that's not right, call it out, whatever. But definitely, that claiming of what we do is important. And doing as we practice. Like we'll do bonfire here with our neighbours here. We'll go out with the children. We'll play all those games, and we'll just keep it rolling. And I know that the young ones down here, but it's great. Do you ever see the games as well, Liam, where you are putting? You're always trying to cause a bit of harm to someone as well. Like my little one, for example. When we play the flower game, she's a habit now of hiding conkers into them, So when you put your nose down, she jams your head into the plate, and so you get a conker stuck to your nose. That's a little bit of an edge to stuff,
Yeah, a bit of development. Yeah. But look, it's been a pleasure talking to you, Michael. And I encourage people to go to the website folklore.ie if they want to enjoy this Halloween and find out the origins of it. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, and I hope you're enjoying your Halloween night. Michael Fortune from folklore.ie, artist, folklorist, little bit of everything there on the website. Please go and visit us. Thank you, Michael. I appreciate you coming and talking to us.
Thanks a million.
Now, real people, real opinions. Nighttime Talk with Niall Boylan.
Ireland's Classic Hits Radio.